G'day, g'day, g'day. Welcome to the Underrated, Overrated Dumpster Fire podcast. I'm Sam Edmonds.
I'm Paul.
And this is the podcast/video experience where every week we take a classic album and we have a chat about whether we think it's underrated, whether we think it's overrated, or whether we think it's a genuine dumpster fire. It's also a YouTube experience, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, it is a YouTube experience.
It's actually better on YouTube, a lot better. So if you're still listening on podcasts...
what is this, 2019?
Yeah.
No, it's 2021. Get on the YouTube.
Get on YouTube. Unless you can't see things, in which case, do the
Way
podcast.
to bring the mood right.
Well, I didn't want to be ableist, Paul.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You know, we're an open, inclusive...
You can also still listen on YouTube.
You can listen on... Yeah, you can. Yeah.
You might need to get YouTube Premium or something so it plays while your phone's shut.
I have YouTube Premium. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is the podcast/video YouTube experience where we have a chat about classic albums. And we're going to do two this week. And this is a very special one because what we've done is we've read the comments that you guys leave some more below, where you guys suggest albums that you want us to have a chat about. And one of them was you really wanted us to have a chat about the Oasis album, Definitely Maybe.
Yeah, and we thought, you know what? Maybe that's a good idea. I think definitely it's a good idea. Definitely, maybe.
I think it's a very good idea as well. And what we thought we'd do is the classic thing that everybody did in the 90s, and we're going to do Blur versus Oasis. And we're going to take the debut albums, the debut efforts from both. Blur's Leisure from 1991 and Oasis's Definitely Maybe from 1993.
4? Yeah, cool.
1994, and we're going to have a chat and we're going to rate them and talk about them comparatively.
We're going to rate them underrated, overrated, or dumpster fire. Should we say they can't be the same thing?
They can't be the same thing.
Right, cool.
They won't be the same thing. They won't.
Having listened to this album.
Having listened to these.
All right, cool.
So, for those living under a rock, which I say most weeks, Blur and Oasis were bands in the middle of the 90s. Oasis went a little bit longer.
Oasis and Blur were bands.
In the middle of the 90s. And they were part of a genre that had been dubbed by NME and some of the music critics.
NME.
NME, Mortal Enemies, NME. They had dubbed this movement, this genre, Britpop. And they were the two biggest bands in the Britpop sphere. Blur started a little bit earlier. Oasis were a little later to the scene, but ultimately much more successful in terms of like records sold. But there was a real feud between the two of them that was really drummed up by the press because the British press really love a feud.
Love of feuds. Like classic feuds like, you know, Oasis and Blur, the Queen and Diana.
Yeah. Charles and Diana.
Strap versus Tellys from Underover Dumpster Fire.
Everybody else versus Diana. Basically anyone versus Diana or Strap versus Tellys.
This is getting real. Anyway, moving on from the Royals and that pile of... Anyway, sorry. What are we talking about, Sam?
We're talking about Blur versus Oasis. Now, when I was younger, to be contrary, I was a Blur guy. I hadn't really listened to any of their music at all. It became abundantly clear when I did the research.
Why were you a Blur guy?
Because you were an Oasis guy. So,
cool.
You're like a dyed-in-the-wool Oasis guy, Paul.
Yeah, I was definitely not a Blur guy, and I guess we talk about, you know, when we first listened to the album. I couldn't answer this question for Oasis because it was obviously I was 5 when it came out, but like it was just about, and the Blur stuff where I grew up wasn't. It wasn't about, and obviously Oasis a lot more successful later on. But. Oasis was the working class band and Blur was the posh twats band. So I feel that I fell into that more working class vibe. You know, growing up in Glasgow, it's just that's Glasgow. That's Scotland, really. And they were a lot closer to, you know, if somebody came in speaking like the guys from Blur into like your school, they would have get the shit kicked out of them. Whereas, Liam Gallagher probably not.
No. Yeah. And Manchester literally also quite close to where you grew up.
Yeah.
Like quite far in the north.
Well, they got signed in Glasgow.
Really?
Oh, yeah, Oasis.
Tell us about this,
How do you
Paul.
not? Oasis. So the other big thing that we might talk about is Creation Records.
Yeah.
There is a new biographical film out produced by Danny Boyle, written by Irvine Welsh. Trainspotting with Spud from Trainspotting in it as Creation Records founder Ellen McGee.
Oh wow!
So it's it is Trainspotting light from all accounts. Centered around their journey, and they were a huge, very cool label.
Who is Alan McGee?
You Alan McGee? Alan McGee. Let's rewind.
I'm gonna be a millionaire one day.
Sort of late 80s to most of the 90s really, and Oasis were one of those big flagship bands that signed to them. But Alan McGee's from Glasgow, but he was up in Glasgow, and I think the story goes that Oasis shared a rehearsal space with an ex-girlfriend or something of Alan McGee, and Alan McGee saw that she was playing at King Tut's Wawa Hut, which is a
say that 10 times fast.
Which is a massive venue in Glasgow. Like, it's the place you want to go and play some music, and see some live music. So he saw that this ex-girlfriend's band was playing there and was like, I'm going to show up and just to make her nervous or throw her off her game or something.
Like men do.
Yeah. But he's gone. She's got no idea. She's brought Oasis along. She's just like, yeah, you can come. You can go in the bill as well. Apparently there was a bit of a kerfuffle being like, oh, no, they can't go in the bill.
Yeah. But they ended up opening.
The other band, they were like, oh, we'll go on, but we'll only do half our songs. And then Oasis can come on and basically finish our set. And they're like, fine, that's fine. And then Alan McGee's there and goes, these guys are good. And then walked backstage, got a tape from someone, and then was like, yeah, I want to sign you on the night in Glasgow.
Crazy.
King Tut's Wawa Hut. Yeah.
King Tut's Wawa Hut.
So there's a connection there.
Yeah.
And there's, they're a bit of a football band as well. They're quite notorious for being massive Man City fans, which I won't hold against them. But their songs get sung at the football. And I remember probably in Louva, first time I listened to Oasis, one of the stories I know about Oasis was there was an away day for my team, Glasgow Celtic, in Europe somewhere, and Roll For It off the next album comes on just the stadium PA, and all of a sudden all the Celtic fans are singing and they're jumping about and carrying along, and there was security guards there because it's football in Europe. And my uncle was on the end, and the security guard goes, what's going on? Is there a fight? And he goes, no, we're just playing some chins. And they were just jumping about, having a mad time to Oasis. So Oasis, I think, will get very different connotations in that part of the world as to maybe they do these days as well as this part of the world.
Yeah. Well, because Paul covered the Oasis thing, I'll do the Blur.
Yeah, good.
So the group consists of singer Damon Albarn, guitarist Graham Coxon, bassist Alex James, and drummer Dave Roundtree. Bit of trivia for everybody. Bassist Alex James now runs a cheese farm.
What?
Yeah, he grows and pasteurizes cheese.
And they all wish I was Darth Maul. I'm this useless bass playing cheese idiot.
I'm going to just jump in.
I found out about that on Buzzcocks.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in quickly just to drum up the Battle of Britpop even more. So you've read out their names. Oasis, other than Liam and Noel Gallagher, it's Bonehead, Giggsy, no, I don't know what Bonehead's real name is.
No, but these are fairly British names: Albarn, Coxon, James, and Roundtree. That sounds like a pace attack.
Yeah,
for England's best 11.
Sounds like a private school.
Yeah. So London, England was where they hailed from. They formed, Damon Albarn and Graham Coxon were childhood friends from Essex, home of the famous...
The only way is...
I'm clipping something from that.
Smashed it.
Welcome to Casa del Wicks.
All right, so what's for dinner?
We've got beans, mate, and a croissant.
Oh, really? What's for dinner?
Beans and a croissant.
And they met Alex James when they began studying at London's Goldsmiths College in 1988. Damon Albarn, for those who maybe aren't familiar with his work in Blur, would be familiar from his work with the Gorillaz.
Yeah.
Unless you've been living under an even larger rock.
Yeah.
Obviously, very successful animated band. He's the main head honcho behind that. But that's Blur. Definitely more of a
Probably for
more of
our
a
age
privileged
group.
upbringing.
Yeah,
Definitely less
yeah.
working class, more maybe open, free, kind of. Yeah,
I feel like
Different
they've
vibe.
maybe been them doing what they're doing is a choice. Like, oh, we're gonna be musicians and we want to do this, and whereas
the Gallagher brothers
would have been homeless.
Yes.
And it was just oh, you were good at it, so you played some gigs and things happened.
Yep.
This was a little bit more of a deliberate. Well, it feels like it was a more of a deliberate push by Blur to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna be cool.
Yeah. So they obviously got a little bit more off the back of the end of shoegaze in Britain, and really at the onset of grunge. And before we get into these albums, we need to talk a little bit about what Britpop is. It's kind of a really weird term that encapsulates a lot of alternative rock bands in England around the same time that alternative rock was really blowing up in America.
Yeah.
That had a really distinct British edge to it.
Yeah.
And I was trying to I was having a chat to somebody about this poll the other day, and I was trying to explain what my understanding had become through research for this episode, what Britpop is.
Yeah.
And you look at grunge in Seattle and some of the alternative music, it's very down and sad music. Like you've got a lot of melancholy, a lot of people talking about, in many cases, suicide, sadness, disenfranchisement, that sort of thing. And a lot of the suburban class within America, particularly white, middle class males, really, really identified with that.
Yeah.
They felt a little disenfranchised, a little bit kind of alienated. They were Gen X. Things were going on. It was weird.
Yeah.
England had a similar thing, but I was explaining to this other person, America had been settled by white people for 260 years.
Yeah.
So they'd only been miserable for that long. Whereas white people have been miserable in England for millennia.
Oh, we're
and they're
good at
so
that.
much better at it. Yeah. And you listen to Britpop and you listen to some of the, especially Blur, there's a lot of cynicism, a lot of irony, a lot of really tongue-in-cheek talking about their own situation and others. That's quite cutting and in a sarcastic, dry wit that is very British.
Well, you go back to the classic British comedies that just don't make it in America. They just don't get it because sometimes it's quite cutting and quite dark, and sometimes there's a real obvious political overlay or commentary that's being said by it as well. But it's a little bit clever. We've got Eloquent at being miserable.
Yeah.
But also going, that's a bit of a laugh that went out.
Yeah. There's that line that I always come back to that I feel sums up the English experience so well. And the British experience is the Roger Waters line from Dark Side of the Moon. Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way.
Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way.
And I always feel that has informed so much music and so much art, or maybe been informing of it for quite a long period of time. And so when I listened to a lot of Blur this week, I got a lot of that. They're singing about, the unique housing park.
Confidence is a preference for the habitual voyeur of what is known as.
Kind of explain it for Australians who maybe don't have the same sort of there's a really interesting way that they kind of the housing project style thing that they do.
So your housing project, so things would have started out similar to compared to Australia, commission housing. And so, and this will go back to Blur being a bit posher than Oasis.
Yeah.
So Manchester and Glasgow are very similar cities in terms of the social economic climate and where their money came from, which were docks, and Liverpool was the same as well.
Yeah.
London's obviously the city. It's going on a bit more, but what happened with these sort of housing estates? So it was government built housing estates where there were cities in the UK and they were just overpopulated because that's the only place there was work. That's the only place. And it was a horrible living situation because there was too many people.
Yeah.
So they're like, cool, we're going to build this big, really nice housing estate. And people went from living in rooms as big as this one, which you can sort of see how big this room is.
It's not
where
very
like
big.
a family in this room and that's their house, to, oh, you've now got like a 2-story, 4-bedroom house.
Yeah.
But it's outside the city, and there's a bunch of other people in houses that look exactly the same as yours. And the problem was there was no infrastructure. So there was, your house was out there, but then there wasn't, you couldn't go to the movies, you couldn't go see. So everyone still had to go to the city to do anything, which led for a very odd suburban lifestyle.
It's kind of government mandated suburbia, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like in a way that it didn't like here in Australia or even in America where it just kind of like naturally happened. Like people just built out from the city because they wanted a backyard. They were very happy being miserable and cold in the London winter in London. And then the government was like, no, maybe you should be out here in some of these, I guess the later Blur album Park Life is very much about that sort of weird style
we've
of
got
living.
a park. And there's fuck all else to do apart from go to the park.
And go to work.
Yeah.
On the tube.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the
the
over rail and then
But yeah, anyway, sorry.
And was that like just in London or was that in Glasgow as well?
So Glasgow had a massive overpopulation thing.
Yeah.
And then it was probably like the 60s or something. They built all these housing estates.
Yeah.
So that's where I grew up.
Yeah.
And so my gran owns it's her house now, but it used to be owned by the government.
Okay.
So when it was built by the government, and it's in a row of houses that all look exactly the same.
Wow.
My gran got really lucky. They've got like the corner one, which is the best one to get.
Yeah.
But that's hers now. So like they've a lot of your suburbs, and they're fine now. Like there's things there now, but they very quickly realized like, oh, we can't just have these houses and nothing else.
No.
This episode's got quite political quite quickly.
Because the more I deep dove in.
Down, double back twister, bangs his head in. Textbook. Lovely. Let's see it again.
Into it, the more that. So, like, I've been on record before and I've talked to people on this podcast before. I think the best music, like, best popular rock music, has always come out of England, Scotland, Ireland, out of the British experience, out of the UK and also Ireland. I think there's something about how they do popular Western music that's just. It's either trend setting or it's trend perfecting. And I think the Britpop thing was just a giant spot that I didn't know anything about. And it was like a black hole in my knowledge of UK music. And I really wanted to do the deep dive on it. And so when these sorts of things were coming up, it was really, really interesting. So I want you guys to have the context as well for the albums that we're talking about. Because if you listen to Leisure, which came out in 1991, and you listen to Nevermind, which came out in 1991, these albums don't sound anything alike, and I want you to know a little bit why. The experiences are completely different. A lot of people think that the UK and America, like a lot of the pop music's the same, a lot of the art's the same. They're very, very
Worlds
different places.
apart.
And the one that sets the trends is not necessarily the one that you think it is.
Yeah.
I think if you look through your record collection and the bands you really like and the albums that you adore, most of them will be British albums.
Or there is a heavy influence of a British album. I think there's more nuances because, as you said, Britain had been doing these things for longer.
Yeah.
Like there's a cultural, like things are ingrained culturally that go back to, generation to generation to generation, and things changed like the housing estates, and then after those things and they realized that there was a mistake not having facilities, that's when you get things like Park Life, where they're like, oh, we need a leisure centre out there. Or we need something to keep the people entertained. And it was a bit, particularly for, I think, like a band like Blur, probably fits into this category in my mind, where they don't have it hard. There's nothing about them where they've had that hard a life.
Like they're meeting up in college to form a band.
They're privileged enough that they can... they're writing their songs on a piano, not on a £50 guitar that they've picked up or they've borrowed from someone or something. I think I heard Graham from Blur speak about, I used to have, and this is like album 1, a Les Paul that he bought off his sister's friend, who was a doctor. So that's your crowd you're hanging around with. I guarantee it, nobody from Oasis was hanging around with doctors.
No.
Unless they were a little bit corrupt.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Nick.
Yeah.
But they were in this privileged position where it wasn't like, oh, I'm not the richest person around. Like, I can't just do what I want. I'm not the queen. I'm not that elite level of society.
Yep.
But I'm well enough off that I don't really have to worry about it.
Yep.
But what that's doing is making me miserable because I feel like nothing matters.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that melancholy and just like unsatisfied angst where they didn't really have anything to be angry about.
Yeah.
But they had everything to be unhappy about.
Yeah.
And that's what Blur sounded like.
Yeah. And that's been such a common thread from literally the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction through Bowie, through the Smiths, through UK music for 50 years.
Yeah.
There's a dissatisfaction with the current situation, whether it's political, personal, spiritual, whatever.
And it's the current situation, and it's been the same for the last 80 years. Not the same situation, but we're always unsatisfied with whatever it is now.
Yeah. A lot of people say that Britpop had its particular kind of bent, and we'll move on to the albums in a minute, because it kind of went hand in hand with the Labour government that had come to power in Britain as well, and Tony Blair, and a new way of thinking that kind of encouraged a little bit more left-wing idealism. And what that kind of embraced then was that it really paved the way for, this is, from what I think, and I think Damon said it in one of his interviews, and probably Graham as well, the last time, especially in UK top 40 music, that it was as dominated by guitar music. We've never seen guitar music reach the heights of popularity since than it did in those 3 years from 94 to 97, when
100%.
you had the Park Life self-titled, Definitely Maybe, What's the Story, Morning Glory.
Yeah. That the sort of early to mid 90s were 100% a well, it was obviously huge for Britpop, but like, and you can think and go, well, you know, like guitar music, like American Idiot was huge, but that was what else was happening then that was as big as that. Not that much. Like, you had supporting cast members that were, you know, and by that I mean other bands that I might consider big, but nobody now is going to go, oh yeah, I know them. Whereas everybody knows Oasis and Blur, even though the only song you've heard of Blur is Song 2.
Yeah.
And, well, yeah, it's going to be pretty obvious what we think in a minute.
So let's talk about it. We thought the only fair way, initially we thought maybe we could do the 94 releases. We could have a look at Definitely Maybe versus Parklife, but we didn't think that was very fair because Blur had 3 albums to get to the point of Parklife.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a like-for-like debut comparison.
And to be fair, as you mentioned, London band, Blur, that's 3 years ahead of Manchester and Glasgow anyway, so...
It's a long way there by train.
Yeah, that's it. You didn't have the internet. Things weren't getting there that quickly.
Yeah. Did Enemy even print in Manchester? We don't know. So, what are we going to talk about first? I'm thinking of a number in my head. 1 or 2.
1.
Definitely Maybe.
Cool.
All right, so we're talking about Definitely Maybe. So Definitely Maybe, debut album by Oasis. Now, what did we like and what did we dislike? We're going to do what did we like about Definitely Maybe to start with, and then we'll do what did we like about Blur's
Cool,
Leisure.
got it. Yeah.
So,
we
what did
definitely
we like?
discussed this pre-show.
Always.
Professional. What do we like about Definitely Maybe?
Yeah, Paul, do you want to go first?
Yeah, cool. I'll kick us off. Look, I think it's really honest. It's simple. And it's only as clever as it needs to be. Not any cleverer than that.
Yeah.
Which I guess I said in simple, but I think that says what I mean better.
So it's accessible, but it doesn't...
Yeah, it's accessible.
It's not, but not in a sold out way. It's just in a good music done well.
Well, it was still different to other things that were getting... It was different enough that it stood out.
Yeah.
Without having to be... Like, there's not... I don't think Noel Gallagher's a great guitar player, or Bonehead's a great guitar player for that matter. I think there's value in Liam's voice and his presence, but he wasn't the best singer at the time. But they just had all the...
Better than Damon.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that in 3 segments time. That's not good. I actually think Liam's voice on definitely maybe was potentially the best it sounded.
Yes.
Yeah, and also the B-sides are really good. So actually, I'm going to say that. So probably one of my top 5 Oasis songs was the B-side to Shaker Maker, I'm going to say.
Yep, Bring It On Down.
Do you want to be a spaceman?
Yes.
Seen your face round since I was a kid. You're bringing back those memories of the things that we did. Hanging around and climbing trees, pretending to fly. So wanna be a spaceman, live in the sky.
Or supersonic or something?
No, it's Do You Want to Be a Spaceman?
Yeah, do you want to be a spaceman? Which is really good. No singing on it, which is also great because Liam could have been interested in
Doing
B-sides.
No.
What happened to... Obviously, I know what happened to B-sides because you can't have a B-side to a Spotify release.
No.
But, like, I feel like they were a real thing. Like, you had to... I remember watching an interview with the Blur guys and they're like, oh, yeah, we had to go back in and do the B-sides.
Yeah. And now you just do a remix. Like, you get an electronic musician to do a remix.
Get somebody else to do it, or you get Eminem to do a third verse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, Beyonce to be on Savage. And then you end up winning 9 Grammys or something.
Timbaland to just go, hey!
Oh, what? Hey. Yeah. Yes. So the B-sides are great, which I guess is like, because this album was so important to you growing up, those albums you become a completionist about. And like having the whole, like, what was that band like in a time capsule experience? The B-sides really help.
You know what the B-sides are? The relevant thing is to do. B-sides, so for example, a John Mayer B-side is his little like YouTube shorts and TikTok videos that he does showing you how to play Neon or whatever. It's your little backstage pass into like being like, oh, I want to understand this band more. I want to get my head around what they're doing more, which I get, and it's a valid thing to do in terms of like, oh, I like this on the surface. If I can hear more of what these people do, I think I'm going to understand the main songs better, which I definitely think it does. And something like "Do You Want to Be a Spaceman" sounds frivolous at a first glance, and then you read it again and you read the lyrics again and you go, okay, no, there's references here to, you know, being a child and having a dream, and then just having life take that away from you.
Yeah.
And then going, well, you know what, maybe you still can be a spaceman later on in verse 3.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, it's light. It probably was done in an afternoon. Oh, yep, cool. There's the thing. It's just a guitar. No, because it was the B-side. But so yeah, your B-sides are great. I think there's a lot of good tracks on here. Like there's a surprising amount of, hey, that's a genuine good song.
Yep.
And there's a rawness and an immediacy to it, which I probably say about a lot of albums I like.
Yep.
But it's it's also arrogant and brash. Like to have a debut album and your first song is Rock and Roll Star.
Yeah.
The balls, the absolute balls. But to be fair, I don't think it's not an act. They're not putting it on. They're not trying to. It's not some Jonas Brothers American Idol style contraption. Liam Gallagher thought he was a rock and roll star well before he ever stood next to somebody holding a guitar.
Yeah. That might be a good segue into what I like about the album. There is a real earnestness to this album.
Yeah.
They're really happy to be there and doing what they're doing, but they're also unapologetic about how they approach things.
Everything. Yeah.
And it's raw and it's it's really interesting because by this point you'd had 3 Blur albums, you'd had a Suede album, you'd had a couple of Pulp albums, and we'll talk a little bit about those later on as well.
Stone Roses,
where you'd had that kind of more British melancholy, and then you get this thing and like it's heavier for one. It's heavier, it's louder, which there's some mastering issues with it. Like it's
sound guy sounds coming
so
in.
it's difficult to listen to. But if you had it originally on CD, I'm sure it would have been a very exciting experience. And there's some really, really great tracks here. Noel, out of the gate, is really, really good at writing pop tunes. in a way that appeals to people that are like rusted on classic rock guys.
Yep.
You know, working in the factories, at the football games.
Yeah.
And also would be appealing to the, you know, the sorts of bars in Soho and Camden and Shoreditch where they were playing and that where they were meeting, you know, these other Britpop bands and rubbing shoulders and trying to win the scene, or trying to make their impact on it. And it's really hard to walk that line, I think. And then obviously it went to the next degree on What's the Story, and they sold 15 million and became, for a couple of years, the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
But this is a really cool little... It's a much more defined and better example of this sort of debut effort than the one that we're going to talk about next, Paul.
Yeah.
Now
I'm just going to throw quickly on what I liked about this one as well. So there's some ballsy songs on here. So like I mentioned, Rock and Roll Star, Live Forever. Cigarettes and Alcohol, Supersonic. Which are all quite aggressive, I'm going to say ambitious tracks in terms of like they're really like chest pumping.
Yeah.
You know, I'm having a crack at this. I'm going to just go out and have a great time.
Yep.
I don't think anybody else could have sang or wrote these songs.
No.
Like, I think they're good songs. And if anyone else did them, if Noel had written Live Forever and then given it to someone else, it would come across tacky.
Yeah.
It would come across as forced and ingenuine, and it wouldn't hit the same level.
No.
But because you've got his dickhead brother Liam up the front with his Parker and his hands behind his back.
Yeah.
Actually just being a rock and roll star, not because he wants to be a rock and roll star, but just because he doesn't know what else to do other than be that.
It's how he identifies.
Yeah, it's how he identifies.
He identifies as a rock and roll star.
Yeah. On Liam Gallagher's email signature, it says Liam Gallagher, rock and roll star / rock and roller. Anyway, sorry. So should we talk about...
Yeah, let's talk about
Blur?
the Blur album. I think this part of it will be quick. The things we liked about Leisure. Now, Leisure is just, and I'm going to be honest, so that you guys don't get like blown away. This is a first effort, and fuck, it sounds like one. It is really, really rough in spots.
Yeah.
Things I liked about it, there was some good guitar riffs in spots. There was a drum loop that I didn't mind.
There was
probably about it. It's really, really tough to listen to.
I think
the album art's good. The album art's great. I'll give it that.
The album art's quite polished.
But that has very little to do with the quality of the music.
Look, I'm going to throw it in there because some of those punk albums I'm very fond of, like The Clash. Had a brand and a style that was very well done.
Yep.
I liked There's No Other Way.
Yep.
That's probably about it. There was a few bits where there was it's a lot more delicate than most things.
Definitely maybe.
Most things are more delicate.
I think this Enema is more delicate than definitely maybe.
Yeah, the girl on the cover of Enema of the State is more delicate.
More delicate than
definitely maybe. We might do that in the future.
Yeah, maybe.
Comment. I like There's No Other Way, and then there was maybe like a couple of seconds of some other tracks I liked. I'm Trying Really Hard. I didn't like. I've come into this as I know Oasis. I don't know Blur.
Yeah,
I'm gonna give them a crack, and I did a deep dive in the Britpop stuff as well. That's a lot of what I've listened to. It's not very good.
No, this album is really, really rough, and so we'll transition straight into what we didn't like about this album before we get back to Definitely Maybe. And I think Damon Albarn is fantastic. I think he's one of the best of his era in terms of songwriting and musicality. Maybe not just with later albums with Blur, but obviously with the Gorillaz. Demon Days is a classic, all-time classic album. but he is really, really rough on this. And the things I disliked were basically any time he sings on this album is, and by his own admission, apparently they were trying a little hard to appease the record labels that signed them back in the day, or probably still now. Record labels see trends and then they try to assign bands that they think might fit into those trends. And so instead of seeing the potential of a band, they will often see your ability to replicate. Now, this is a year out of the Stone Roses' amazing debut, the Stone Roses.
Which is huge.
Yeah. And shoegaze is happening and things are taking off. And I think they may have tried to push Blur more into that direction. That's obviously had a really negative impact on this album. But more than that, Damon just really, really struggling with the sort of hooks and melodies that he would later write. He doesn't hit any of them. There's a couple of times where there's some really ugly double tracking on here as well, where the first take was pitchy and then they've just double tracked under it, and that's even worse. And they just clash. I don't know who the other, Graham Coxon does backing vocals. The harmonies are off most of the time. It's really, really rough to listen to, and any sort of musical interest that you would get that would be interesting out of a guitar riff or a drum loop or a groove idea is almost immediately ruined as soon as Damon starts singing. And like, I really like some of the other Blur stuff. This is not one of them.
So my big problem with this was the only reason I listened to it twice was because we were doing a podcast.
Yeah, same. Absolutely. I did not. I put it off. I listened to about 9 Britpop albums before I came back to this one because I was like, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah. Well, so here we go. So I think I messaged you, like, so we decided this. We both listened. I think we might have had a message and gone, shit, that's rough.
Can it be Parkway, please?
Really, really bad. But I was like, so one of the comments, I think Sophie actually mentioned it was, wait, this is Blur?
Yeah.
There's other bands that do this better than Blur.
Yeah.
So there's other bands that, and like, one example was potentially the Stone Roses, as you said, just come out. Maybe they're getting signed because they're like, oh, maybe you could be like another Stone Roses. But I feel like Blur's, I expected more because I'm like, debut album, Blur got hyped in a similar way to Oasis. And obviously it was a better album out at the time that definitely Maybe came out and What's the Story. But I expected more given what I knew of the Stone Roses, and because I feel like they're quite a niche band. Like, people who listen to the Stone Roses are Stone Roses fans.
Yes.
And they're like, you know, the only people that I know that listen, I don't know any Australians that listen to the Stone Roses. It's all British people. Yeah. And it's all people who were big Oasis fans.
Yep.
Like, big, like, you know,
do you think
B-sides are where it's
at? Do you think
it
maybe Blur was signed to try and replicate it and Oasis ended up doing it better?
Well, I think Oasis,
I think the three of them are really different bands.
Yeah, I think Oasis were potentially the furthest away from what the other bands sounded like. Yeah, they were a rock and roll band. Yep. I think the title Britpop's entirely unfair.
Enemy.
Enemy. What are you doing, man? What are you doing?
Well, on record, like Elastica, you ask any of these Britpop like pioneers, they hated the term because they played rock music and they played alternative music.
Did Primal Scream
and by
get
calling
lumped in
something
that as
Britpop,
well? How are Primal Scream pop?
Yeah, it's rough. So that's what we disliked about this album, and let's talk a little bit about what we disliked about Definitely Maybe. Do you have anything you dislike about this album, Paul?
Yeah, look, some of the tracks are a bit long. You're probably going to go on about that.
Yeah, I was about to say that. It's at its best here. But they're starting to get to the point, by the time you get to Be Here Now, which is the album after What's the Story, Morning Glory, and you have songs going for 9 minutes 20 because they just keep repeating choruses, solos come in, and then they don't, and then they do. And he's the germs of that sort of behavior are on Definitely Maybe, but he typically, I don't know if it was the producer as well, reined Noel in a little bit on this.
Yeah. Well, it sounds, and like we'll talk about the sound a little bit, I guess, because it's not polished in
No.
any way, shape, or form. I think that's fine. Maybe it helped.
You said they had a lot of issues with the mixing.
Yeah, so I think they mixed it 3 times, mastered
Yep.
it twice. They had 2 goes at recording.
Yeah.
And they moved them to different studios, got different people to mix it, handed round the tapes to a bunch of people, had real trouble with it. I think a lot of that back to their drummer being a bit shit. But a lot of the...
Ain't it always the way?
Yeah, a lot of the feedback around what those early tapes sounded like was it just doesn't sound like Oasis. Like all the people around the band wanted them to sound like they did live, which is loud and aggressive and not Britpop but rock and roll.
Brit rock.
Like it was popular in Britain, but like it's not. Why are we fascinated by
pop as a term?
Well, just adding genres. Every time there's a new band, we create a new genre. No, it's just music, man. Like you're a musician.
I guess it was probably like a race to the bottom with grunge, like because grunge had become such a catch-all term in the States that maybe Enemy and some of the music critics thought that they needed one where they could have just said guitar music, because that seems to be the common denominator.
Yeah.
Although some of the later Blur albums use less and less guitar, but it's still present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were doing a lot with the guitars in terms of like what they sounded like and stuff.
Yeah. Whereas Noel's playing big chords.
Yeah.
He's playing the same.
And he's
blues licks
staying there the whole time. Like it's so there's not heapy diversity on this album, I guess.
Yeah.
There's enough that I'm interested, but it's all energy all the time. To be honest, I would listen to any of those tracks. I'm just looking at the track listing now.
I really like Married with Children is my shout out. Like
Married with Children,
it felt like a real palate cleanser at the end of the
the chaos that was.
I hate the books you read and all your friends. Your music shine, it keeps me up all night, up all night.
It's non-stop.
Yeah.
And that might be another thing I dislike about it, is mastered terribly. And I really struggle to believe that they did it this twice.
Yeah. Well, they obviously just got to one point and just went, oh, that's fine. Though apparently, so we talk a lot.
So loud, there's no dynamic.
We talk a lot about this on this podcast about like the loudness wars. Apparently this guy invented, one of the guys that did it invented it, where he had something where he basically boosted it. So, and because nobody else was doing it, he goes on, self-proclaimed that for 6 months, every time it would go on at a jukebox around the country, it'd be louder than everybody else's.
It was before Spotify like made everything the same volume.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why, because we were listening on Tidal and Spotify this week. So this is the same volume as Leisure. On the radio, they would have been different.
Well different,
back in the 90s. Do we want to talk about how they were received, Paul?
Yeah, let's do it.
Definitely Maybe was named the 14th greatest album of all time in a Music of the Millennium poll conducted by HMV, Channel 4, The Guardian, and Classic FM.
All right, so British audience there. I'm just caveating
review
this.
scores. AllMusic gave it 5 stars. Encyclopedia of Popular Music gave it 5 stars. Mojo gave it 5 stars. Pitchfork gave it 8.8 out of 10. Q gave it 5 stars. Record Collector gave it 4 out of 5. Rolling Stone gave it 4.5 out of 5. The Rolling Stone Album Guide, however, gives it 5 stars. Spin gives it 4.5 stars, and Uncut gave it 8 out of 10.
Shit, that's some good reviews.
Reviewing the 2014 reissue of Definitely Maybe in Mojo, who had given it 5 stars, Danny Eccleston stated, "There's nothing more exhilarating than the feeling of something great is about to happen. It's a force that courses unmanageably through Oasis's debut album even today. This is transcendental rock and roll music that celebrates the moment, not a moment." That's probably the highest praise we've read on the podcast so far.
But all of that centered around the energy of these tracks, and in that sense, I agree. And there is something, and this is what I like in my music. So I'm definitely biased in terms of like I like the Clash and the Sex Pistols, which is all energy-based music. I want it to be honest, and I just want, and I like a little bit of a hopeful tone, like feeling supersonic. Fuck it, I'm a rock and roll star. I'll do what I want. Let's just go have a good time. Like I like that hope and optimism, even though some of the other parts are a little bit things are a bit shit, but we'll have a good time anyway. I will be a spaceman. Do
we dare look at the reactions to Leisure?
All right, let's do it.
because
don't know what
we're
this
trying
is.
to pack in basically 2 album reviews for you guys in a 1 hour episode. So
Yeah.
if we're moving at a clip,
Clock is on.
just enjoy it. We're moving basically at the sort of energy level that Oasis did.
Yeah.
So All Music gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Drowned in Sound gave it 8 out of 10. Encyclopedia of Popular Music gave it 3 out of 5. Entertainment Weekly A-. Pitchfork 5.8 out of 10. Q gave it 4 out of 5. Rolling Stone Album Guide gave it 2.5 out of 5. Select gave it 5 out of 5. Smash Hits gave it 8 out of 10.
Other than the Entertainment Weekly A- and the Smash Hits 8 out of 10, some of those are pretty on. It's probably a 2.5 out of 5 in it.
Yeah. Do you want to hear how it was received?
Yeah.
With reviews. In a 2007 interview, lead singer Damon Albarn expressed distaste for the album, describing it as, quote, awful, and being one of the 2, quote, bad records he's made in his career, the other being the Blur album, The Great Escape.
Wow.
Which is not as bad.
It wasn't good. Don't listen to it.
Highly enthusiastic David Kavanagh wrote in Select magazine that the 4 Blur boys have guaranteed themselves a hefty leg up in the being taken seriously stakes with the thrills they've carved into the grooves of leisure.
What?
So, that's a pretty good review normally, but that compared to what the Mojo guy said about Definitely Maybe, where it's something transcendental is happening in rock and roll versus a hefty leg up in the being taken seriously stakes, which I didn't even know was a
Okay,
series of
so
stakes.
here's... I get what he's saying, because that album being shit, and as you said, there's a few good ideas in and around that album.
Yeah.
You don't pay attention because it's so god-awful to listen to, though.
It's really tough.
But because it's not good, people are listening for the good bits.
Yeah.
Whereas Definitely Maybe just rushes past you. I had a fun, great time. That was great.
Yeah.
But it's hard to go, oh yeah, you're not just the head of Britpop. You're not just another rock and roll band.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
yeah, those...
So
those
reasonably
those
well
are-
received.
It's a bit average, isn't it?
But
It
there's
gets
some
mixed.
8s out of 10s, there's some 5s out of 10s. I wonder if a lot of it is coloured later reviews based on the career that Blur had, whether they go back and look at this album with rose-tinted glasses.
Or not. Because, I know some of these are about the remaster in 2014. Why bother me? You can't polish a turd. But, I wonder what the context is done, because they were big, and I guess they had a couple of years to get, they got a second album.
Yeah.
Would you have given them a second album?
Based on this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I do know that on the second one
Just
they get
'cause they-
told write a hit,
Yeah.
because if they didn't, they're getting binned.
The second album was really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Do we want to give our forward reviews, Paul?
Let's do
It's
it.
the part of the show where we give a forward review. It's also the second beer portion of the show with the Chewbacca bottle opener. We didn't organize this. He has one at his house, and I have one here. Literally the
It's the same. It's the same. Oh, it's not on autofocus.
I don't know
so
if
just hold it
we're not
here.
sponsored by Star Wars, but if you want your bottle opener to make a growling sound, get one of those. Just makes sense.
I didn't really think this through because I can't understand.
Anyway,
Just
our
makes
forward
sense.
reviews.
Yeah. All right.
Let's start with Definitely Maybe. And I'll give you my forward review
Go.
first, Paul.
Do it.
Definitely better than anticipated. I didn't have high hopes for this. I remember getting this on CD years and years ago. And I don't know if this strikes anybody as weird as somebody who's on a podcast that criticizes music, but I used to not like different things than what I was used to listening to. I was very critical and contrary, and Oasis fit into that group because a lot of my friends, yourself, viewer Tony, good friends of mine that were big Oasis fans, and it was just, I'd play devil's advocate, and but I had a really good time. Definitely better than anticipated. I anticipated
I'm so
very
glad you
little,
like
and I
it.
had a really, really good time listening to it.
I think there's some undeniable attributes to this album, and by that I mean that whether you want it to or not, this album will make you do something.
Yep.
And maybe it's not your cup of tea.
Yep.
fun story about a cup of tea. I know I'm dragging this
Oh, no,
out.
you
We'll try
go.
and power through. Two fun stories. I was watching an Oasis documentary, and it was in the middle of the whole Oasis are rock and rollers. They got a ferry to Amsterdam and they get turned around at the border and sent back because they got in a fight and all this sort of stuff and all the rock and roll and drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think it was the other guitarist, Bonehead, who was like, oh yeah, look, all this rock and roll stuff's great and, dancing and drugs and all that sort of stuff. But, it gets about 10:30, I just want a cup of tea in my bed.
See, even the British do rock and roll differently, don't they?
Yeah. But he's doing that, and then Noel also got quoted in an interview is saying he got asked about taking drugs, and classic posh British press being like, you shouldn't be, is that sending a bad message now that you're a big superstar? And he goes, everybody takes drugs. You take drugs. You take drugs. You take drugs. It's as British as having a cup of tea. So tea's there's a couple of things the Brits do well. Melancholy, just being unsatisfied with things, and cups of tea. And whether that means cup of tea and Coke, or a cup of tea in bed, both
Each
work.
to their own.
Both work. But
Another aside, even though we're supposed to, I was lucky enough to get to London back at the start of 2020, just before COVID.
Yeah.
And came back with a raging tea addiction. Like, literally tea, just tea. I got some very good English breakfast at the Portobello Market. And,
Nice.
Delicious. Anyway,
Yeah.
drink more tea.
Drink more tea. That was
everybody.
the moral of this story.
So,
Tea vitality.
what's your forward review?
Just rock and roll.
Just rock and roll.
It's just rock and roll, ain't it? And Britpop can fuck off. Fuck you, NME. It's just rock and roll. And what I mean by that is it's no more than that. Don't try and make it something it's not. And I feel like Noel and Liam are quite happy to be like, it's this. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't read into it. Don't criticize the simplicity of things. It's rock and roll. Leave it alone. Have a good time. And that's that. Just rock and roll. Also a line from one of the songs. So
another just bit of trivia before we move on from Definitely Maybe, and might inform whether we think it's overrated, underrated, or a dumpster fire. In a 2006 British poll run by NME and the Guinness Book of British Hit Singles, the album was voted the best album of all time, with the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band finishing second. This is the popularity of this album. Okay.
Can we...
Also, NME listed the album at number 3 on its list of greatest British albums ever, behind the Stone Roses' self-titled debut and the Smiths' The Queen Is Dead. I would noticeably, some other albums from Britain that it beat out would be Dark Side of the Moon and every Beatles album and every Led Zeppelin album.
Okay, so let's put some stuff in context here, because we're going to do something I've not told Sam about yet, and he's just going to have to deal with it. But it's fine. It's nothing. It's not a quiz. Sorry, Josh, you've ruined the pod.
Quiz.
But look at this context here. So NME placed it as number 3 in the list of greatest British albums, behind the Stone Roses.
Yeah.
Who outside of Britain listens to the Stone Roses? Yeah. So that's in the Smiths. The Smiths are, get listened to outside of Britain, but again, you would consider them like a cult band.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider them a popular success.
No.
And they're saying that the Smiths is the second best record, which being popular shouldn't define whether or not it's the best or not.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty fucking good indication.
Yep.
The other reviews we got there, really British focused. Are we able to Google? I'm going to do it right now, and it might come up in your screen, or it might not. See what Sam's feeling like, or if I edit it, I'm not going to do it.
That's rock and roll.
Just rock and roll. But can we Google American review? Definitely, maybe. I'm just trying to give myself a fighting chance not to overrate this.
I'll look into it.
Yep. Yep.
All right, let's do the forward review.
Yep.
Of Leisure by Blur.
Do you want to go first again? Because I can't remember what mine was.
Yeah. Please skip this album. You'll have a much better time with Blur, in the same way that Radiohead fans have a much better time if you skip their debut album. Not every band nails it out of the gate.
Yeah.
We can have the Blur versus Oasis talk until Kingdom Come, and it will continue to happen, and people will continue to talk, even though Damon and Noel are best friends now. And they both don't talk to Liam. but this album's not good, and so please skip this album.
Not a leisure activity.
Yeah,
it's not. Do not waste your leisure time listening to this album.
I was trying to work that into mine as well, and I couldn't do it. Oh, that's brilliant. Not a leisure activity.
Yeah.
Nah, there's better things you can do with an hour.
I don't think I've got anything else to listen to one of our or watch one of our YouTube experiences.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say about the Blur. I think there was a lot more. I love all the rock and roll bullshit that goes along with the Oasis.
Even if it was mostly a beat up by Enemy and the press.
Yeah. Well, no, I think they, and like the whole, like, people go, oh, you know, is it just like a press thing and a marketing thing that Noel and Liam don't get along? No, they don't like each other.
Yeah.
And like you can go, it's entirely believable. Like it was Liam's band.
Yeah.
Noel comes along, likes the songs, and they're like, oh yeah, this is great. But then Noel starts singing and
there weren't any fistfights. It was the most British feud ever. Like in America, literally the same time, gangster rap was happening. They're both dead. Like Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac, they both they got it heated and they shot each other. Basically,
there was
they avoid each other. Damon said he avoided Noel in some pubs for about 10 years.
Yeah,
that's as brutal as it got. Like it's so British.
I think it was good that it was it was Blur and Oasis and not like if Noel and Liam were in different bands, it would have been a different story. There was a story that when they were recording, it might have been definitely maybe actually they were recording. And Noel was doing his guitar part, so Liam's like, well, I don't need to fucking be here, I'm fucking off. So Noel just left alone in the studio doing his guitar parts. He goes out, get pissed, brings a bunch of people back to the studio. No. Chaos ensues. One of Noel's guitars gets damaged. And Noel hits Liam over the head with a cricket bat.
Certainly in the topsy-turvy world of heavy rock, having a good solid piece of wood in your hand is quite often useful.
I can see it out of Spinal Tap.
It is. It's so Spinal Tap. It's so real. Apparently, Liam wasn't interested in music. And then there was he's a bit of a tough guy and always sort of was up for a scrap. And there was like somebody from a rival school that.
Apart from that, he's always listed as lead singer / tambourine player on. The buffest of instruments.
Yeah. But he get hit in the head with a hammer. But from a boy with at a rival school, and apparently he was not interested in music until then. And
then he got hit with
a hammer.
Got a concussion.
And the joke is that
it was Maxwell.
He got the talent beat into him.
Oh, I thought the joke would have been he got beaten with Maxwell Silverhammer, which would have that's another thing. They don't sound anything like the Beatles, and I'm going to make a big apology.
We're saying here,
yeah. As I make that he got hit over the head with Maxwell Silverhammer joke, but the thing that they said, they don't.
No,
they really don't. The beat, their softest song is heavier than the Beatles pretty much ever. So I don't understand that at all. It's a lazy comparison. It's one that I've made often, and I'd like to unreservedly apologize. They really don't sound like the Beatles. They're a different kind of talented. Maybe not as.
Yeah,
just different.
Yeah.
Do we want to underrate, overrate, dumpster fire these two albums?
It's really hard.
And settle the Blur Oasis feud once and for all, based on their debut albums.
All right, cool. I think I can do it.
All right.
And we can't give the same rating to both albums.
No, that won't be a problem.
I don't think it's a problem. Should we do the Blur one at the same time? Because I think we're going to agree.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1.
Dumpster fire. Is that our inaugural dumpster fire for this season?
It is. It's our first YouTube dumpster fire. I don't know what happens. Is there flames? Is there something that, does the dumpster fall from this? Is it just that dumpster floating down the river? I haven't edited it yet.
Yeah, Sam's definitely doing it.
I don't know. It could be all of those things. It could just be me going, we don't know.
Yeah.
But that was a dumpster fire. Leisure is a dumpster fire. Damon thinks so as well. So I feel better saying it.
It's not good.
It's not a good album. Skip it. Listen to Modern Life is Rubbish or Park Life or even the Blur self-titled if you want something a little bit heavier. Don't. Or listen to the Gorillaz and have a much better time.
Well, no, there's the thing. So the Gorillaz stuff is much better.
Yeah.
Though it's a little bit I'm not going to form the same connection with a band like the Gorillaz or a sound like the Gorillaz as I am with Oasis.
Yeah.
So I'm still trumping that. Like, I'm still saying Oasis is better than Blur.
Yeah.
Because, yes, it's good.
Yeah.
It's definitely more clever. I don't care enough about it because you probably don't care enough about it either. Like, you're like, oh, this is good. Like, the way I've put the guitars or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
but you don't care enough about it, so it doesn't have the same energy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Modern Life is Rubbish is good. It's probably the best of the bunch.
Yeah, I think so too.
Song 2 doesn't
Song 2.
represent Blur at all. Like, that was the only, like, that's the only song everybody knows about Blur.
Yeah.
It does not represent them as a band in the slightest.
It's a cracking tune, though.
Oh, it's a great song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember we were in a cover band years and years ago. And I guess maybe we didn't, or maybe we did it tongue in cheek, but I think we played song 2 into Don't Look Back in Anger. Like, it was really, really weird. But
hilarious.
They were both terrible versions of very good songs. Definitely Maybe. Overrated, underrated, dumpster fire.
All right, you go first, because this is going to be hard.
Overrated. It's not the third best album of British album of all. Get the fuck out of here. It's a great album. It's a lot of fun. It's awesome. It is not transcendental. It's rock and roll music. It's rock and roll music, and it's done really well. And I agree with all that, but let's call our jets on it being like even fucking top 10, maybe top 10 of the 90s in Britain, in Manchester. But like not, it's not, yeah, it's not top 10 British albums of all time. It's not top 20. Like, it's not Adele.
It's not Adele. Fun bit of trivia: Sam goes running to 21. Yeah, jogging in the deep.
So overrated for me.
All right. So here's the thing. I really like this album.
Yeah.
You listened to a few more Oasis albums.
Did.
So you listened to...
I reckon What's the Story is much better. I really enjoyed that. There's a little bit more dynamic. There's some like quieter songs
it's
on there.
recorded a lot
The singles
better.
are great. And Morning Glory as a track is my favorite Oasis track.
All right.
It's been stuck in my head all week. It's so much fun.
It's cool.
That's for like if I put the video in and YouTube box it. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
So I think What's the Story is better recorded.
It's not better mastered though, but it is better recorded.
It's I like the rawness and the immediacy of this.
And you said the real dyed in the wool Oasis fans, this is their favorite Oasis album.
Yeah.
Almost always.
It's either this or the B-sides.
Yeah.
Like, Master Plan's my favorite Oasis song, which is the B-side. Maybe to Wonderwall?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the B-sides are really good, where there was less thought and less pressure went into them, and they're quite often just Nolan on acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
So I think that's some of the best Oasis stuff. So I think the things that they do well when there's less done to them, like on this album. So I think I would put this as a better album than What's the Story.
Yep. But is it underrated, overrated, or a dumpster fire, Paul? We could probably rule out dumpster fire.
Yeah, it's not a dumpster fire. It's really, really good. I don't think it's 10 out of 10, which is what a lot of people have said.
Yes. Though
I think people outside of Britain don't rate it highly enough.
Okay.
So I'm going to go overrated.
Okay.
Purely because...
Are you going to go overrated?
Underrated, sorry.
Underrated, okay.
I'm going to go underrated because I think it's not rated highly outside of the northern half of Britain.
Yeah. Okay.
Those people overrate it. They can their jets.
Yep.
But everyone else underrates it.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Well, there you go. There's our definitive. I guess Oasis wins out of the Blur Oasis fight.
Oasis wasn't a dumpster fire.
Yeah. That first Blur album was rock. So we're going to do a little bit of a different what we've been listening to lately. We did a real deep dive into Britpop this week. So if you were released in the 90s and you were guitar rock, we'd probably listen to you. If you're Britain. So we'll do like kind of a joint shout out. Maybe we'll do some popcorn. I'll say one. You could say one. We've already talked about the Stone Roses debut album.
Phenomenal. Absolutely brilliant. It's as far as because I don't think Oasis fit in the Britpop sound. Stone Roses probably did a little bit more. They were a little bit of a bridge between Oasis and the rest of the Britpop crew, like your Pulps and stuff, which we'll mention. But they did that sound you're wanting. If you've not listened to Blur and you have an idea of how they sound, not from song 2, Stone Roses is what you actually want to listen to. Really good. Really good. What do you reckon, Sam?
So another one I would recommend is the 1994 Pulp album, Different Class. Might be the best Britpop album that was released, I think. I rate it a lot higher than basically anything else we're talking about this week. It's a really, really good album. Common People. It's really, really good. Highly recommend you listen to that one.
I'm trying to remember what else I've listened to. There's so much.
The first Suede album.
Stuff. I think I've written something.
So that's another one. I would also, if you want to do the shoegaze thing, they just released their stuff for the first time ever on streaming services. If you haven't heard Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, do yourself a favor, go listen to it now. It's one of those albums that, transcendental. Like that guy said about Definitely Maybe. It's one of those for me. Love that album. And they're Irish English. So they're kind of in the vibe.
And the other thing I'll give a shout out to, because it was part of that Creations Records vibe. It was part of Creation Records, Primal Scream.
Yes.
Like a little bit, they somehow get lumped in with Britpop, and I really don't understand that. So if you liked the Oasis vibe with the, hey, this is a bit more guitar forward, then give Primal Scream a listen. A little bit older, again, like a couple of years previous, but part of that same sort of scene.
Screamadelica, if you haven't heard that album, go listen to it. They released at the start of the 90s, managed to predict in the first 3 tracks popular UK music for the next decade. The first track is a Rolling Stones style tribute called Moving On Up. Which is basically what the genesis of what Britpop would be with all that kind of guitar driven stuff. The second track is a techno house rave track, which we'll do one of the UK garage albums at some point. But that was a giant part of the scene, was rave culture in the UK in the 90s. And then the third track was like this trip hop thing that sounded like something that had been recorded out of Bristol, a la Massive Attack, Portishead, Tricky.
Massive Attack were cool as well.
So I don't know an album that's basically predicted the trends of a whole decade of a particular region's music the way that Screamadelica did, but listen to that album if you haven't, and then listen to all the UK music from the 90s and you'll have good context for it. And if newer stuff's more your thing, there's a lot of bands kicking around today that were obviously heavily influenced by the Blurs, the Oasises, the Suedes, the Primal Screams, the Pulps of their day. Listen to the first Wombats album, and only the first Wombats album. I'll put that up on the screen now. The first Block Party album, and probably only the first Block Party album, Silent Alarm.
All of these are better than Leisure. Better debuts.
Arctic Monkeys. Again, the debut, or even AM is a great one. Any other?
Tell you what, I'm going to shout out again. I've done it a lot. I talk about Creation Records back then, and they were like they were the cool record, the scene. I'm going to go back to my Seven West. West music record out Glasgow.
Yeah.
That's signing a lot of cool raw bands that have, and I'm not sure if they'd appreciate the Oasis comparison, but they've got the immediacy.
Yeah.
They've got your more classical Britpoppy guitar lead lines in there.
Yeah.
But they've still got that rawness and the energy, and some of them are a little bit heavy. So some bands like I was very proud when I saw Lewis Capel to give the Snuts a shout out.
Oh, nice.
Just a couple of months too late, mate. I got in there first, okay? Calm Down Lewis. We should do that album. Divinely inspired to the hellish extent. So give anything on Seven West a listen. Follow them on Instagram or something, and then link to their Spotify playlist. It's all genuinely phenomenal.
And if you've got a Britpop album that you want us to listen to that we haven't, which is highly likely, it was a large decade of music, so let us know, and we'll have a listen to that during the week. If you want us to have a chat about maybe another one of the albums from one of these two bands, or even any other album that you would like us to have a chat about, also leave that in the comments down below.
We might do a speed fire round on Instagram, IGTV or something as well.
That sounds great. That sounds like a really good
We've discussed this
idea. So that was us talking about Oasis and Blur and their albums. Check out our Instagram and our socials. Keep following us. We've got lots of content coming to you. Lots of cool, fun new things that we're looking to do to try and, really just open up the world of music to people that maybe didn't know about Britpop, or other genres like me as of a week ago, and now am a pseudo expert. So keep following us on everything, and we will catch you.
Oh, here we go.
Side.